Today, we're going to be talking about respiratory compensations that are seen in acidosis. So, the first thing that we need to discuss is the importance of being able to maintain blood pH. So, pH is hydrogen ion concentration. That is how it is determined. So a low pH is associated with a higher hydrogen ion concentration, and a low pH is a lower hydrogen concentration. So a low pH is considered higher acidity, and then a high pH is considered a more basic solution. So acidosis is when your arterial blood pH is going to be below 7.35, and alkalosis is when your arterial blood pH is going to be above 7.45. And there are three controls to maintaining this blood pH. We have your chemical buffer systems, we have the respiratory response, and we have the renal mechanism of pH control. Now, an arterial pH of less than 6.8 or greater than 8.8 is not going to be compatible with life. Because of this, death will occur if the arterial pH will be outside of this range of 6.8 to 8 for more than a few seconds. Because of this, the hydrogen ion concentrations in bodily fluids must be carefully regulated. Fluctuations in this can alter nerve function, enzymes, and potassium activity. So metabolic acidosis is when there's too much acid in bodily fluids. This can be caused by two different things. This can either be from an overproduction of acids, or this could be from an inability to efficiently remove acids from the body. This can be caused by things such as diabetic acidosis, hyperchloremic acidosis, kidney disease, lactic acidosis, aspirin poisoning, or severe dehydration. This is going to cause things such as rapid breathing, confusion, and fatigue. So the first way that the body deals with metabolic acidosis is the buffer system. So a chemical buffer system is a mixture in a solution of two chemical compounds that are going to minimize pH changes. So whether an acid or a base is added to or removed from the solution. So there are four different buffer systems that the body has. The first is H2CO3 and HCO3 negative buffer system. The second is the protein buffer system. Third is the hemoglobin buffer system, and fourth is the phosphate buffer system. And each buffer system is going to play an important and different role in the body. So the H2CO3, HCO3 negative buffer pair is the most important buffer system in the ECF for buffering pH changes. This is going to be important for buffering pH changes that are caused by something other than fluctuations in CO2 that is generated by H2CO3. So the kidneys are what's going to regulate the HCO3 negative, and the respiratory system regulates CO2, which is what generates H2CO3. So this buffer system includes involvement of CO2 via the reaction that we have already talked about and we'll talk about further in this lecture, which is when CO2 and water are combined to create an H2CO3, which is then converted to hydrogen ions and HCO3 negative. Now, this reaction can either run in either direction. So once you start to get a buildup of those H ions, the hydrogen ions in the plasma, it's going to send that reaction in the reverse way. So the HCO3 negative is going to combine with those hydrogen ions to create H2CO3. And then to CO2, which is going to get those hydrogen ions removed from the plasma. Next is the protein buffer system. This is mostly important for intracellular balance of acids. So the most plentiful buffers in the body are the proteins, including the extracellular proteins and the plasma proteins. These are excellent buffers because they contain both acidic and basic groups that can give up or take hydrogen ions. So the more limited number of plasma proteins reinforces the H2CO3, HCO3 negative system in extracellular buffering. The third is the hemoglobin buffer system. This buffers H ions that are generated from CO2. So hemoglobin buffers the H positive ions that are generated from metabolically produced CO2. So CO2 is transported throughout the body by dissociating into a carbonic acid and a hydrogen positive ion. So hemoglobin actually bonds with that hydrogen ion to neutralize it so that there isn't as much acid in the blood. And then the fourth buffer system is the phosphate buffer system, which is an important urinary buffer. So this system consists of an acid phosphate salt that can donate a free hydrogen when the hydrogen falls, and then a basic phosphate salt that can accept a free hydrogen when the hydrogen ions rise. So in acidosis, metabolic acidosis, it's more important that it can accept a free hydrogen when the hydrogen is rising. So this is another one where it can alternately switch depending on what the demand of the blood is. So it's important to note that this chemical buffer system is actually going to be acting as the first line of defense against changes in the hydrogen ions. So next we're going to talk about the respiratory response. But first I want to talk a little more about something that I was just mentioning in the prior slide, and then also something moving forward that's going to be important. So CO2 and the hydrogen ion production, 60% of CO2 is transported by dissociating into bicarbonate, which is that HCO3 negative, which is important for the buffer system and also important in the respiratory response. So the final product when bicarbonate is produced is also the hydrogen ions, which can increase the pH in the blood. And I do have that reaction shown at the bottom there. So the body has peripheral and central chemoreceptors. The central chemoreceptors are going to be responding strongest to changes in CO2 in the blood, and these are located in the medulla. The peripheral chemoreceptors respond strongest to changes in the hydrogen ions in the blood, and these are located in the carotid and the aortic bodies. So the respiratory response to metabolic acidosis, the level of respiratory activity is governed in part by the arterial hydrogen ions, and this is going to be our second line of defense. So the first line of defense was that buffer system, and that is something that is going to be responding within seconds, which is important because, like I said earlier on in the presentation, the body can only be outside that pH range for a few seconds before the body would no longer be able to be alive. So the respiratory response takes a little bit longer to respond, just because it has to be triggered, it has to go to the nervous system, and then your body has to change your respirations. So the peripheral chemoreceptors are going to sense an increase in those hydrogen ions, This will cause the respiratory center to increase respirations. Increased respirations are going to blow off more CO2. So what's going to happen is to create the CO2, the bicarbonate is going to combine with the hydrogen ion, which is going to get the hydrogen ions out of the blood and hopefully decrease the concentration of hydrogen ions. So this is just a chart that kind of shows what I was just talking about. Ventilation is going to be increased in metabolic acidosis, which means the rate of CO2 removal is also going to be increased, which means the rate of hydrogen ion generation from CO2 is going to be decreased. Some considerations with this. This is only going to be able to return your pH to about 50 to 75% of normal if it's acting alone, which is why it's so important to have those other two processes as well. The peripheral and central chemoreceptors do oppose each other. As the pH will return to normal, the ventilation response will be diminished. And this is only going to be useful in non-respiratory acidosis. And then finally, the last way that the body can make up for metabolic acidosis is going to be through the kidneys. So kidneys are able to adjust their rate of the hydrogen ion excretion in 3 different ways. So it has hydrogen excretion, it has HCO3 negative excretion, and it also has ammonia secretion. All 3 of these are going to be able to change the pH of the body to raise it so that it is not as acidic within the body. And these are our references. I hope this has been a good presentation for you.